What's up, troop? It's Unders, and in this video we're going to break down the mastering session for my new track Light Me Up, which sounds like this.
So light me up, light me up.
Now, I produced, mixed and mastered this whole release, so if you'd like to see the process and the breakdown of the track, there'll be a video linked in the description below for that as well. If you want to hear the full track in context, I'll make sure that is also linked down below. So let's dive into the session and look at how I went about mastering this project. Thanks to the channel sponsor DistroKid. DistroKid is a music distribution service and the best way to get your music out to all of the modern streaming services fast, efficiently, and within an independent artist's budget. Check out the description below for a discount today. Okay, so first off, this is my mastering session. Just to explain what's going on, I usually have like a rough master, unmastered mix, some other references in as well. In this instance, all the referencing and other tunes I've got in are loaded up inside Ozone. I tend to do that a lot more now. If we go into reference, you can see here, they are there. But if need be, I have the session up so I can just drop them straight into there. There's loads of plugins loaded up on the channel here. They're just preloaded, so I can just grab my most used ones and drag them over for the project. The actual master itself, or what's going to be the master, is up here, and it looks really squished out, and we can see it's mixed to 24-bit 44.1. However, if we turn this off, it's actually got loads and loads of headroom and room to work with, and that's really important because if you need to do any EQ boosts or anything like that, you need to have a little bit of headroom to work with. So let's have a look at the process. So the very first thing I've got in the chain is this SPL iron, but it does loads more than just compression. There's a lot of character that comes from it. So we'll mute everything else out, so we've just got this soloed. We'll just take a prominent bit of the track, get some context on it. So you should be able to hear what it's doing there. It's effectively taking all of the dynamicness and just kind of gluing it together, giving it a bit of a stick so it feels like a whole track. Also, it's lifting up the top end quite a bit. The middle section here, we've got like the air bass, for example. Just helps with that lift, especially just having that switch on makes a huge change, and as well the tube bias being on the mids changes it dramatically, so we've got it on mid there. It's a really characterful EQ, but also very clean. Now it's not compressing loads, there's loads of dynamic in this track. If we were to zoom in, we can see there's some huge transients, and it's only really compressing by about 3 dB at the maximum. It will catch maybe up here and go a little bit more. However, the attack's really slow, so loads of the transients are just getting through, and it's picking up things like the bass line and the long vocals, letting the transients pass through and lifting everything else up, and just helping stick everything together, make it feel like an overall tune. And that's the first stage that we're going through there. The next thing I've got is a UAD pull tech. Might seem like a kind of unusual thing. You might want to go for a really clean EQ. This guy, I use it loads. It just adds a really nice character. Now, the overall track, when I mixed it, sounded really nice and balanced, but when I was referencing to some other tracks, I was finding this area here, the sort of 700, needed a big lift up. Now, a nice thing with the pull tech is you can do 2 at 700 and you can push and dip. So it's going up to 6 here, but being dipped back by 2 on the other side here, and that just gives a really nice effect. It's one of the great reasons of using the pull tech and the character it adds. So with that in, there's quite a big difference to the focus and the vocal of the mix. Take it off and then put it back in. helping the whole mix sound fuller. You get the impression of the strings being a lot more lifted up and a lot more in the back, and the vocal becomes a lot more prominent, even though we're doing it over the stereo and not the mid side, but we do look at that in a little bit. So far, those two on the go. Now, once I've done that lift, it was bringing up some other areas that I didn't think were great and were making the mix sound a little bit tinny. I've used this tool here, it's called De-edger. Effectively what this does, it's like a really super accurate de-esser that we can set at a set frequency. And as you can see here, it's set at 625 Hertz. Now we were lifting up at 700. It's very likely that we've lifted that area up as well. And it just needed a little bit of honing in that area. And that's what the de-edger here is doing. Now, I'm not picking that up too much in these. However, when mastering, it's really important to reference on multiple things. So like we've got the monitors here, another set of monitors here, multiple sets of headphones, including like consumer ones. And it would have been on something, probably something like these, like small in-ears, where that was really prominent, and the de-edger's doing the job there to just tame that in. And it's something you won't pick up if you just always use the same monitoring. You need to have some kind of scope of how everyone else is going to listen to it as well. After that, we've got Ozone, and Ozone is doing a lot of heavy lifting. So we'll break down what we're doing in here. Switch it on. So first off, we've got the exciter, and the exciter's only really putting a bit of work in the low end and a tiny little bit in the high end. But we take all these guys off. It's doing a huge amount, especially for the top end and the like fizz of the track. So let's have it in. That's a huge difference there, and it's giving loads of high-end lift. So it's not EQ, it's the exciter. So I'm adding saturation, adding harmonics in. In the low end, what it's doing is just adding some extra like sub in and just giving extra bit of fuzz. And I did that based on the reference material. The low end was a lot more defined than what I had at this stage after it had been compressed and we'd done the EQ lift. This resolved it. I don't just put an EQ shelf in, just bump it up. Use a little bit of distortion here, and specifically the triode. And then the high end, we've used retro, and that's just giving us loads of high-end harmonics and really brightening up the whole track. Now from there, I've done work obviously on using the exciter on that sub end. We've used the low end focus. Focus listen on that to hear what it's doing. Okay, so it's just really taming all that sub and just giving us all of that wobble. We can go the other way and add loads of pulsing in. I didn't think it was needed this far down, so we've ended up somewhere like that. So we've still got loads of kick energy otherwise. Now dynamics, we're doing something similar to what we're doing with the exciter. I'm now controlling that low end with quite a bit of compression. We're taking it down by sort of another 3 dB. So remember, we've compressed the whole track using the iron. I'm taking it down by 2, maximum 3 dB. Now I'm taking it in parts of, say, just the low end down another 3 dB and just really squashing it, because again, on referencing on other bits of hardware when I'm listening to it. In some cases the sub or the bass is being lost, and it could just be there if it was just maintained a bit more in level. So that's what we're doing with the compression there. Now this time I'm really focusing in on this mid section here, and if we switch over to mids, because we've got this compressor in mid side, I'm focused even more in here. And we're really just aiming to lift this up, and if we solo it you'll hear why. Yeah, it's just that main body of the vocal, so we've just taken it in the mid, compressed it, lifted it up a little bit, so the vocal always sits exactly where it should in the mix, whereas with the sides I haven't lifted that or done that really at all. We've got a dynamic EQ, just doing some very precise control, both the dips, just in some key areas that at some points get a little too bright with everything we've done, and just controlling them with some dynamic EQ. Very, very subtle adjustments. Literally, so some of that high end where we've maybe overcooked it a bit with the exciter, but we just want to bring down that area. And similar with the top end of the vocal. Right, and some bigger moves with the EQ1. I've given a bit of a lift again. We've controlled that sort of 10K region. I've been able to lift everything up above it and give it some even more brightness. And again, we're focusing around this area. You know, we're a little bit below the 600K now. It needed a bit of a bump around here. You can hear the elements that are in here. Doesn't necessarily sound something like you would boost up, but in context of the whole track. So to me it really helps that bass lift out a little bit in this instance, and here we're controlling the harmonic between the kick drum and the bass and just giving it a little bit of space and separation between the two. These aren't massive adjustments, but they're less than 2 dB. I think that's 1 dB there, 0.8 there, and -1 there. So they're really small adjustments, but they just help in that subtle balance and pulling focus to those key elements that I want to stand out. Now Imager is just here for problem fixing. Track otherwise, when we check it in mono, actually sounds fine. All the elements are still there. Just when we solo out the low end, it does have a bit too much movement, so we just brought a little bit of control in there just to keep it solidly phase correlated, not wobbling out over the place. Even though it sounds fine when we sum to mono, we might as well correct that most low end, because it only takes the tiniest adjustment to easily go out of phase. So, and the last thing in the chain is some loudness. Adding quite a lot of gain in here. I can get away with really pushing it up because the other sections of the track here, for example, are really nice and quiet. So I can have the louder sections be a lot louder in terms of LUFS. If we put gain match on, we can just A and B all the different elements as they come in and hear the changes that are made. you go, that's a breakdown of the mastering session for my new track, Light Me Up. I hope that's been helpful for you to see inside that and how we've got there. And I think the real big thing to take from it is there's no huge, massive, drastic changes. I think the most drastic change is probably the exciter really lifting up the high end and giving us that great big boost without just throwing an EQ on and giving it like a 10 dB sweep. We've added harmonics in there into that space by effectively distorting just that area. That's the largest change when we switch that on. Everything else is just small, subtle changes, just to either correct an issue or ever so slightly, by as little as 2 dB in some cases, address the balance and overall get us to our final result. If you'd like to see the breakdown of this track and how it was made, you should check out this video next, and I'll show you all the elements that came to putting it together. And I look forward to seeing you in that one. Take care.